Welcome to the Dr. Mary Louder podcast show, where we explore the messy, magical, and deeply human journey of healing. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Louder, a board-certified osteopathic physician, an accidental shaman, and a lifelong student of the human experience. Together, we're going to talk medicine, wellness, and culture in a way that's grounded, perhaps maybe a bit cheeky, but always from the heart. And don't miss Gadgets, Gimmicks, and Gotchas, my reoccurring segment where we lovingly call out the fluff and highlight the stuff that actually works. So grab your favorite brew, coffee, matcha, or that mysteriously green smoothie and settle in. It's time to get this party started with a strong dose of soul medicine. Well, welcome everybody to the Dr. Mary Louder podcast. I have a very special guest today, Jane Burns. Jane is, she's a shaman, and she wrote a wonderful book, a couple books, but the most recent one that she's written is called The Hungry Sea. And we're going to talk about this book and how it is, as a novel, it is ripe for our time, our culture, the things we need as humans, what our soul needs, and how we can really learn from this wonderful book and have insight into our life and the life of our loved ones. So welcome, Jane, to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm glad I'm here too.
Yeah, it was, I was very excited to have you come on because when I started reading your book, I was just completely captured from the first page. And I found it a very complex book to read because of how the stories were written, but then the simplicity was in there too. And I just thought the facets of the topic we're going to talk about regarding this book and what the book goes into is absolutely, absolutely needed for our time. And so I'm not going to not going to let the cat out of the bag yet on this one. So, but before we get to your book, if you could share with us a little bit about your journey as a shaman, how you even were attracted to that, how that or it attracted you, or what your journey was to get to where you are at this point.
I always answer this question a different way.
Good, good.
I don't know whether that means I came in from many different directions or
Yeah.
certainly many different influences. I grew up I was raised Catholic, and I was very fortunate to have two very, very devout parents, particularly my father. My father's commitment to his spiritual path was a huge, had a huge impact on me.
Mhm.
He was kind of one of those people that had a huge impact everywhere he went. But, I lapsed away from that when I was a teenager, but, my interest in, spiritual matters really never went away. At that point, I just had more questions than I had answers or a path or, a direction. And then my father died when I was 26, and, it was like the first major death, that I had experienced, and I began to work my way through grief and begin to become familiar with that process, much as I really would rather not have. Um, and what really grabbed me at that point in time was the question, where is he?
Mhm.
You know, what happened to him? Is the is our is our relationship still ongoing? Do we still have a relationship, or is that over because he's gone?
Mhm.
And I remember the world and my relationship with the world was so impacted because it didn't have him in it. And it was a different place, that I was now living in. And I was going through, an adjustment with that. So that was raising questions, in my mind as well. And I think around that time, I started, just this little thing that I would do just to kind of make myself feel better. I would talk to him, like on my way home from work. I was living in New York City. And I'm walking home from work, and I would like just start talking to him. And sometimes I would hear him answer me and say something, And I just thought, well, this is just a game I play, to make myself feel better and to keep our relationship going. But he's really, left the building. And then one day after, maybe, I don't know, 3 to 6 months of this kind of, um, this ongoing conversation, I just kind of noticed this one day. I was like, he's telling me things. What I'm hearing from him aren't things that I know. So they couldn't be coming from me.
Mhm.
And so that was intriguing. And then after that, I really did believe, that I was speaking to him. And it got me really interested in books on channeling. And, I started reading about Edgar Casey and reincarnation and all kinds of things, just really couldn't get enough of it. And, I mean, I've explored all kinds of things, numerology, astrology, tarot cards, you name it, that
Mhm.
it was all very, very interesting to me to explore.
Mhm.
And I kind of got really snagged in the whole reincarnation thing. That was fascinating to me.
Mhm.
And did a lot of work in past life regression in my 30s. And kind of went from there, still, very much interested in spiritual matters, reading spiritual books, but not really finding a firm path necessarily.
Mhm.
I did a little bit of channeling for a while. I was doing medical intuitive stuff. And at one point when I was channeling, I had this message that came through that said something like, we have this great news, you're gonna have this huge experience, this great change that's gonna happen in your life. And I was a little wary, and I said, "Oh, like, it's not gonna disrupt, like, my marriage, my home, my children," "No, no, no, it's not," and so I was like, "Oh, okay." And then this was maybe, like, 3 days later, I got a call from a test that I had that I had cancer.
Mm.
And so I knew instantly. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was this is what they were talking about. So
Mhm.
it framed it very, very differently than
Mhm.
how that experience is normally framed. And the second thing that happened that is very hard for me to totally explain why this was so important, but as I was sort of holding the phone and, like, the voice of this woman giving me this news was kind of still, reverberating, I heard the squeal of the school bus brakes, and I turned and looked outside the dining room window behind me and saw my son, my then 9-year-old son stepping down from the bus, and it was like this tableau that just sort of hit me, and it almost was saying to me, "This is an ordinary thing. Don't treat it as something extraordinary." And I tried to take that approach, and it helped me to discern my path through
Mhm.
cancer,
Mhm.
because when the protocol that was handed to me by, the surgeon and the oncologist, when they delivered their protocol, I was like, "No, that's too extreme. It's gonna disrupt my life too much. I'm not doing that." And I really felt very, very strongly, if I do that, it'll kill me. And I believe that to this day.
Mhm.
And so I had surgery, but I did no chemo and I did no radiation, and I went on my way. And my family was, like, very supportive.
Mhm.
My brothers and sisters, my mother and father had both passed by that time. Um, and so it was an experience that then deepened what I was already doing and what I was already investigating it because now I had a reason to go deep.
Right.
One of the things I realized immediately was, like, the part of me that usually solves problems and does research and figures out what to do is not gonna help me through this, I'm gonna have to go elsewhere. And that's really when I began to, um, sort of journey. I mean, I wasn't journeying in the traditional shamanic journey way. I was really doing it really more through meditation, and I was meditating with a spirit guide who then gave me my power animal, and it kinda went from there, and that was all part of my experience post-cancer diagnosis. That was 30 years ago. So, I mean, it keeps you open, see, because then even though the experience is kind of in the rearview mirror, it's not really in the rearview mirror because,
Right.
I would find that every time I would wake up at night and I would be like, "Oh, what if it comes back again?" and everything. I would also realize that, um, sort of happening at the same time was the fact that I had drifted away from my spiritual practice. As soon as I came back to my spiritual practice, things would even out.
Mhm.
And I really it felt like a lifesaver, it felt like, my rescue,
Mhm.
and so but, I mean, that was the gift of the cancer, is that it really pushed me down the path that I needed to go on. Typically, we say that kind of thing is a shamanic initiation,
Right.
and it brings you to death's door. I mean, I wasn't, hanging, on life support or anything, but
Right.
but it because it is a life-death experience and because it threatens impending death, it puts you on that threshold between life and death, and that has remained a fascination for me continuing on. I think it's a flavor of my work,
Mhm.
and I do a lot of work with the dead and, communicating with those who have passed over and ancestral work and
Mhm.
so on and so forth. And so it's part of the reason why the subject of death also comes up in the book.
Yes.
And the resulting grief that comes with that and the dark night of the soul.
Yes.
Which was sort of my 2nd, shamanic initiation that I went through about 13 years ago, and that's what made me wanna write this book. Uh,
Oh, wow, that long ago.
yeah, because that was really what was so powerful, um, for me was that experience of dark night. It was miserable to go through and very, very disorienting. Because you completely lose your bearings and you lose every single thing that you ever relied on to get you out of whatever you were in.
Yep.
You're really, really out to sea without oars.
Mhm.
And I wanted to write about that, and I wanted to examine different kinds of grief that people have. But, I am really committed to story and storytelling. I've loved stories all my life.
Mm.
I've always felt that stories had much more impact on me than if I read a nonfiction book
Mhm.
about something. You're using a different part of your brain, you're receiving it a different way, you're actually part of the story because, when you're reading, you step into the character's shoes, and in a way, the things that happen in the book are happening to you, and so it has much, much more impact.
Mm.
And so I felt that's what I wanted to do if I was gonna write a book about death and grief and dark night, it was gonna be a novel.
Yeah. That yes, I think that that's really good because, the what's been in the current understanding, even up till somewhat now, is the 5 stages of grief, and how really what's happening is that never was meant to be linear, never was meant to be, actual in terms of this is you could have a demarcation of what, section you're in, what stage, and my personal experience with grief is that it's all happening at once, w on high volume.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
all of a sudden you're in one, you feel like, "Oh, okay, this," and then you feel that, and then you feel and there are no boundaries, and there is no I couldn't find the end of the grief or the depth of the grief. It seemed bottomless and it seemed
right.
endless.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think it's meant to.
yeah.
It brings you to places that otherwise would not be investigated.
Yes, that is yes.
That that is what I knew and recognized about this, dark night of the soul that I went through, which, after a while you realize, "Oh, this isn't about the precipitating event that ended me here. That's just the horse it rode in on. I'm down here for very different reasons."
Yeah,
I'm plumbing the depths of my history, and I went, way back into childhood and things that had happened to me that had been forgotten and needed to be resurrected and needed to be healed and worked on, and I wouldn't have ended up there
yeah.
otherwise.
Had it not been for the Dark Knight,
Yeah.
right. And it's interesting because people certainly choose to not do that,
Mhm.
and it makes a very interesting split because that often occurs in families where some people, approach it in the very depths that you're discussing, grief and loss, and then sometimes it's just like another day.
What happens in marriages?
Yes.
Look how many marriages split after the loss of a child.
Yes.
Because the parents are grieving in totally different ways, they can't relate to each other anymore, and they're angry at the other person because they're not processing it in the same way they are, and so they feel deserted twice, deserted by the child and deserted by the spouse.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating journey, and it's a universal journey.
It is.
Feel very, very alone, and in many ways, you people avoid you because they don't wanna get in there with you,
Right.
you and so it does feel very alone, but it's also it has this interesting universal quality. I remember at one stage, and I had been, in Dark Night for a while. I was there for probably 5 or more years, um, and I felt like I was just sort of slogging through all this morass of grief.
Mhm.
And, and I felt like, "Okay, I need to metabolize this." And I thought, I don't even feel like all this is mine."
Mm.
It felt like collective grief.
Mhm.
And so I think that's another thing that happens is that you descend onto a level where all grief lives, and any grief that hasn't been processed and metabolized and really needs to be. I mean, a lot of, people who study grief say that, the reason why we have so many of the social problems that we have is unmetabolized grief.
Mhm. Yeah.
Whether it's the, drug problems or political problems or, um, the problem with the medical system, whatever, that it really has to do with this concerted effort to just, push grief away, box it up, pretend it's not there, and
Yes.
just move on down the line, which never works.
Yeah.
And the system all backs up.
Exactly.
But I remember feeling that very, I was like, "This can't be all mine." Like, and I was just sort of amused by the idea that my helping spirits were like, "Well, she's down there anyway, we might as well, like."
Yeah. Let's just give her a few extra things to do. Yeah. Keep her metabolizing. All right. So let's go to the book because in The Hungry Sea, we have some very interesting characters. And the character that starts right off on one of the front pages is Declan. So could you read about our introduction to Declan
Sure.
and the excerpt that I've chose and just we'll go from there.
Okay. Declan. I left the world on a brilliant spring day. The light was so high that afternoon, the sky so fierce and blue. I wonder now if it was already calling to me as I gazed up into it through the window of the car. My father was not himself that day. I watched him as he drove, holding a private conversation with himself. I noticed how dark he looked against the light from the window. I was saying to him, "Dad, are you okay? Dad?" In my hand, I was still clutching the action figure he had just purchased for me. My father was looking across the car to me, trying to formulate an answer. He kept looking, and then it happened. My mother is a remarkable woman, a boy's love and innocence, you might say. But even now, even from this high perch, I still see her that way. I watch her as she wrestles under the stiff grip of her grief. I keep my quiet vigil, awaiting the arrival of the part of her that knows where I am and how she can find me. The old ones say this is what humans do when a death occurs. They look for the one who is responsible.
Yeah.
Sometimes their gaze falls on others. Sometimes it falls on themselves. They become troubled by regret and anger, frustrated by the plodding movement of time as it marches steadily away from what once was. Sometimes everything they know about themselves has to be lost and swept away before they can see where they really are and who they really are. Death can do that, they say. It is meant to do that. Death is not a giving up, but more like a giving away. It's not an end, really, but a continuation. I am holding on to a hope that someday my mother will recognize this and no longer feel robbed of my unlived life. Death for me felt as ordinary as breathing. It did not feel complicated or unfair, and no more aberrant or unnatural than the instinct of birds to migrate. That day, in the midst of that loud and splintering moment, as I looked around at my ongoing life, death was just the simple next breath, the next sublime liftoff. A deep and peaceful knowing settled within me. "Come on, Dad," I said. "It's time for us to go."
I think the thing that struck me in that opening dialogue, that opening scene was how that component is the heart of the book, what happens to Declan, and the domino effect and the facets of that. The action figure, the dad, the fact that it was a car, the fact that how it happened and nobody knows why, and the fact that the mom had unresolved feelings towards her husband, and yet it was Declan in the middle of it who just goes, "Okay," like, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
That honestly totally undid me from page 3 and 4 for the rest of the book, and I couldn't wait to see how all the characters that came in, the facets, the depth, the things they struggled with, and what it revealed in their anguish that went beyond grief and really finding or that how they even attempted to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And, I lost both my parents within a 4-month period. One, we knew my father was going to pass, he had an illness. My mother's was suddenly and without explanation, and then there were medical issues that they did things she didn't actually provide, permission for or informed consent. And as her daughter and as a physician, I had to navigate that. And that nearly took me out, and it took me 5 years to recover from that. So seeing a book like this and literally the unpacked boxes, is your life literally unrolled in so many places and spaces, and yet you didn't know how to put left foot in front of right foot
Mhm.
on most days.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think she describes that to the character of the mother who's
Yeah.
next to us, describes that very thing to, her a man who's becoming her friend. He comes to remodel her house,
Yeah.
and he almost can't stop himself. He sort of regrets asking the question, but he's like, "How do you do that? Like, how do you survive that?" And she sort of describes that where she says, something like, "I'm going through the motions. I'm taking clothes out of the dryer. I'm leaning over the dairy case at the grocery store, and all of a sudden it like hits me.
Mhm.
And it's like, what are you doing? Why aren't you running after him? Why aren't you saving him? Why aren't you rescuing him, bringing him back? It's like, but it's like you're being driven to do the impossible and
Mhm.
you can't let it go.
Mhm.
You know you can't do it,
Mhm.
but you can't let it go.
Mhm.
So I mean, yeah, and it's grief is an amazing teacher. I mean, David White says grief is its own cure. And I think that that is extremely true. You
Yes,
have to get in there with both feet.
you
You
do.
have to let it be what it's going to be, tell you what it has to tell you,
Yes.
teach you what it has to teach you, and accept it on its terms, which are harsh.
Yeah, it is.
And yet, what you're going through is so ordinary. It feels extraordinary, but it's not.
Mm-mm.
And I think that's one of the things, one of the contradictions that is fascinating to me about death is so natural and death is so ordinary.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that way to us at all.
No.
And for someone going through it, like Declan, he's that's kind of what he's conveying. It was
Yeah.
just the next breath. It was
Yeah.
just the next moment,
Yeah.
and was as natural as the instinct of birds to migrate. It's within us,
Yeah.
that program, how to die. We've lost, I think, a lot of in this culture, our connection to it. I
Mm.
mean, I think that the ancients were more in tune with that internal information of how to die and
Yeah.
followed their instincts,
Yeah.
intentionally followed their instincts to make a good death, as they
Mhm.
said.
Right.
And we've lost that
Yeah.
because our instinct now, what we're kind of told, is to look the other way, to avoid it, to get through it as quickly as possible, as cleanly as possible, um, with as dry of an eye as we possibly can muster, and we praise people for being stoic and for not grieving.
Yeah.
Not the old way.
Yeah, and even
Way of
just
feeling and keening.
yes, and just the concept of anti-aging, longevity, defying death. Good luck with that. How's that working? You might as well defy gravity, right? It's just inevitable. It's a law of the universe.
Mhm.
And people ask me often as a physician, "Are you good?" And I go, "Well, 100% of my patients die." I said, "Just eventually, and hopefully not from anything I've done." But I'm saying, I am not I have no no sights on the fact that people are gonna live forever.
Yeah.
And it's the idea of the quality, what a person's journey is, the choices they make, and how they reconcile themselves. And when you are and I remember every hour with my mother, every hour, and the things she said and the things she needed and the things she wanted. And literally, I had to undo the system to get her wishes.
Mhm.
And knowing the system, being trained in the system, in that facility, in that building, in that city, in the same hospital I was born in, was not lost on me.
Yeah.
What I was literally trying to help her achieve. Getting her off the planet was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Well, it wasn't allowing you to be her daughter.
Right.
It was forcing you into, I mean, yes, that's your life path and that's your expertise, and it's good that you had that and that influence in your back pocket to help her, but it robs you of the experience of just being there as her daughter
Yeah.
and just being there with your mother,
Yeah.
and, and that's unfortunate. I mean, I think that being at a deathbed is such a gift
Mhm.
and such a sacred place and time, and, you know, I have clients who have said to me, "How come I'm always the one who ends up at the deathbed?" You know, like, it's a privilege. You're
Mhm.
there because 'cause you're meant to be there.
Mhm.
You came in with that idea
Mhm.
that this was a role that you wanted to play, and there are people who carry that archetype of the gatekeeper.
Mhm.
They're midwifing people either out of life into death or, into life or through tragedy or over the thresholds of their life through the many passages um, that are part of our life process. And whatever that is, um, it's a very powerful role to
Mhm.
play, where you are helping someone to navigate that.
Mhm. Yeah. So when the characters reflect the many faces of loss and the grief, the caregiving, isolation, their identity shifted throughout the book as well. Um, as you yourself as a shamanic practitioner, how do you hold space for that in that kind of complex healing? And what would you offer to someone walking through their own dark night who feels literally unmoored?
Um, I think that it's helpful for someone who is in that process to speak to someone who has been through that process, because I didn't encounter anybody when I was in mine, and no one seemed to understand where I was coming from and kept thinking, like, "Oh, you'll get over this," or they didn't know how to relate, and they were getting impatient with me because I couldn't seem to work my way out of where I was. And so I think that just to say to someone in some manner of speaking, "I know where you are, and I know that you will get out. And I know that when you do get out, as hard as it is right now, it will be so rewarding. Just stay with it. Be
Mm,
alert, be awake, face it head on,
mhm,
because anything that you bury and skirt away, it's just gonna rear its head somewhere else."
mhm. Right,
It's just, as my mother would say, "Get it and get it over with," I mean,
right.
um, and and that's, I think, the best policy. It's hard. It's really hard, but it's such a good teacher. I mean, I really don't, having been through that, I don't regret it at all. If I had it to do over again, I'd be like, "Yep, sign me up. Sign me up for that." Because the rewards are
Mhm.
incredible. The
Yeah,
strength that you garner, the insight that you garner, the increased power, sense of self.
yeah.
My work became so much deeper, so much more powerful, and I was able to navigate that. I was able to handle it because it's like I had been in those waters. I swam in those waters.
Right.
And so it's the other thing about, as I said, I consider it another initiation in my work. Um I'm not put off by anything that anybody brings me. I don't go like, "Oh my god, what am I gonna do about this person?" I don't feel that way.
Mhm.
And it's not because, I mean, I think it's that I see these kinds of experiences as part of the collective human experience, and that's my territory.
Right.
And so I go, "Oh, here's another experience.
Right.
Let's unpack this and see what's in there, where that fits in." And so if anything, it's made my work not only deeper, but more fascinating.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by the human condition.
Yes.
It just absolutely. It just, um, I don't know, it's my passion.
I think that really comes through in all the different characters that come through the book because all of a sudden we're deep into their flaws and their triumphs. We're deep into the things that contrast them. And I thought, how did this was me thinking during how did she figure out how to write that? So, and you put a challenge somewhat in the book, which I've accepted, is why aren't there more shamanic practitioners writing books? And I'm like, okay, I accept that challenge. In terms of a novel, I'd never written a novel or never written anything. Or so explain, I mean, did you actually journey and then end up writing part of the book, or was it, you know, how did it come through, or was it just because you have English in writing in your background for your
Yeah.
degrees, and so, I mean, you're trained, you're not a slouch.
Well, I mean, I've wanted to be a writer since I was, like, 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
The first time I was given the assignment in school to write something creative,
Mhm.
write, like, a little paragraph about something, I was like, "I love this.
Yeah.
I'm doing this." And so, I think that you have to love it. You have to have that passion about it. That's the one thing. In school, what we learned was, you figure out the plot and you figure out all the characters and you do character sketches of all of them and you figure out what's going to happen in every chapter. Oh my God, don't do that. No,
That's what stopped me frequently. I'm like, "Oh, seriously,
no,
what are all these
no.
note cards?"
You know, what I like when I'm writing is I like to feel like I'm hearing the story for the first time. I'm the one who gets to hear it first. That I'm a listener more than I'm a
Sure.
writer. I'm just, like,
Yeah.
taking dictation, and, I love that idea. It it's exciting to me, like, when I have to introduce a character, I just kinda, like, go, like, "Well, okay, who are you? What do you have to say?"
Mhm.
I just let them evolve on the page.
Right.
And I don't sit there and go like, "Well, I need him to say this," or "I need him." I never do that because the characters themselves are wiser than I am. They know themselves more than I do.
Yeah.
So, and then it's an interesting kind of thing because you then become sort of charmed by them.
Mhm.
And fascinated by them. And isn't that a better position for a writer to be in than to be in a position of knowing, like, I know who this person is, and I'm now going to explain to you, my audience, who this person is. It's not that way. When I write, I just and characters always surprise me. I mean,
Mhm.
when I write about the priest who is her birth father. She finds out, 3/4 of the way through the book or somewhere in there. That her birth father is a priest that her mother had a relationship with. And even though the parameters of that are not really they don't the book doesn't really go into, like, what really happened, the mother refuses to speak about it, and she's kind of like both when she meets the priest, he knows who she is, she knows who he is, but they don't admit to one another that they know who the other
Mhm.
is, and they proceed to have this conversation, and honestly, when she goes to the church where he's saying mass to meet him, I had no idea what he was gonna be like.
Mhm.
I thought he could be arrogant, I don't know, I just have to see who he's meant to be,
Mhm.
and so he just comes out of the sacristy and away we go, and
Yeah.
he floored me. That character floored
Yeah.
me. Um, and in an odd way, he kind of saves her.
Mhm.
Not real directly or anything, but he she's caught in her guilt because she feels that she should have kept a better eye on her husband. Her husband
Yeah.
the reason why there's a car accident is because her husband was drinking, and he had a drinking problem. He had been dry for a while, and he had started drinking again, and she wasn't on the up and up. She wasn't looking for the signals and paying attention, so she feels like she was, sleeping on the job, and it was she lost her boy as a result. So she has this terrible guilt, and the priest says to her, "I'll take it.
Yeah.
Guilt and I are old friends."
I know, I was bawling.
And it's where you realize that he had regrets. He had a dark night that he went through,
Yeah,
you know? Um, and, um, so, I mean, in answer to your question, I don't always know.
yeah.
I think that's the best way. I have a loose idea, like, okay, I knew I wanted an Olivia character. I didn't
Mhm,
even I mean, when I had to write a chapter about her, I didn't even know, like, where do I bring her in?
mhm.
Here she is at a, care facility visiting her father who has
Right.
advanced stages of Alzheimer's. I mean, I did not know that before I
Yeah,
started that chapter. So, when you approach the writing in that way, it surprises you in a wonderful way. It puts you in a different position. You're just kinda steering it a little bit,
yeah,
just kinda nudging it here and nudging it there, and it just goes.
yeah,
I mean, I'm sort of exaggerating. I'm making it sound like it just, like, flows.
yeah.
It doesn't
Well,
necessarily, because sometimes it runs aground and you're, like, sort of like, "What?" Um,
did you get lost in the process because you've got, like, one part of a page about one person, another part of a page about another person? I found that because I had to kind of find my way back at the beginning a few times, like, "Okay, wait a minute, who's who here?" Did you find that writing in when you were writing it or just kept flowing and well, it would be.
no, I mean, interestingly, Declan was not a character in the beginning.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And the Celtic stories that are in there now were not there in the beginning. And
Okay.
that idea came to me one day. I was actually teaching a writing workshop,
Yeah.
and everybody went off to write, and so I thought, "Well, I guess I better go off and write."
Yeah.
And so I was sitting there writing, and I got to this idea. I was like, "Declan needs to be in this book."
Yeah.
And I knew I had already known that she told him these stories and that they would be referenced, but I didn't realize at that point that he would be a character and he would retell the stories and that they would be counterpoint with what was going on
Yeah.
in the book, you
Yeah.
know? And, it's a great use of the stories, which I love, the Celtic stories,
Mhm.
and I think it really highlights them in a way that puts them front and center, puts them right in modern day,
Mhm.
and makes them applicable to what's going on right now.
Yes.
I
Def
think a lot of people read myths and they sort of feel like, "Oh, this is really ancient and it
Yeah.
doesn't
Like
apply."
fairy tales, this
It's
was
an
theirs.
interesting
Yeah.
story, but it's so weird and like, but they're so rich,
Mhm.
in what they reveal about our humanness, our failures, our joys, our, you know, and also what incredible creatures we are, human beings,
Mhm. Yes.
you
And
know?
and I have to say I couldn't help but just kinda chuckle at Chase's parents because they just kinda bickered and did this and that, and I'm like, "Okay, here's the pedantic part. Yeah, get on with it, folks." I mean, it was just so everyday and ordinary and so exactly what happens and exactly how parents of that Asian generation would act. It was just like, I totally get this. It was like, "Oh." again, you know, I'm not talking to him. How'd you get to, and I have had parents show up at my doorstep uninvited in similar situations. I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here. What are you doing in my house?"
Yeah.
So
No,
I
I
was
mean, characters they're amusing.
yeah,
You can't help but love Grant.
yeah,
He's bumbling fool. And yet you just feel for him. You just he's just such a sad sack in some ways, but he drives her crazy, because he's sort of clinging to her and everything, and
yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
Now, so looking at some of the ways and things, people that you've studied with and traditions. So first of all, I fully am endorsing this book. People need to go buy this. So where can they get this book? Because it's a read for us for now, because we are in collective grief about so many issues and we need to pull up our bootstraps and we need to face some things in order to go forward as a
Yeah.
I'm gonna say as a nation, as a culture, as a people, as humans, in all so many levels. So I really think, I think one of the things the book did was just open up so many areas that a person could explore at different times. And everybody will have been touched by some part of the characters
Mhm.
in their life at any stage that they're in. There's
Yeah.
something for everybody, for sure. So where can they get this? Uh, what can
It's
they
on Amazon.com,
Okay,
and it's also on Barnes& and Noble.
okay. The Hungry Sea, so everybody go get this. Boom, see, there it is. Um, alright, and so I think that that's just super, super important. I wanna touch before we bring closure to this, a little bit about shamanic work and a couple of questions that people are gonna have because I just hear them rattling around in my own head. So, is shamanism a religion?
No, I don't see it that way. I see it as a spiritual practice. I mean, religion has such baggage,
It does? That's why the question?
and dogma hanging off of it and requirements. You have to do this, you have to do that, rules and, commandments and all that kind of stuff. Um, it's structured, it's inflexible. It generally doesn't change very much as time goes on, religion. Shamanism is incredibly adaptable. It is, considered to be by some, 100,000 years old.
Mhm.
And it has adapted with the changing of humanity, the changing of history, of time, of place, of requirement. There's nothing that you can't do with shamanism. I always say that. It's incredibly creative and adaptable. And because of that, I think that it has the lack of that kind of tight boundary that religion seems to have. This is what it is. This is who we are. This is what we believe. And, shamanism doesn't require that. I mean, I think that there are certain things about, a belief in that everything has a soul and a belief in the interconnectedness of all things.
Mhm,
It's a very animistic practice.
mhm,
Um, but it also, I think, invites into our lives the other world, the
mhm,
spirit world, in a way that, and this is another thing about religion, is that oftentimes in religions, even though, supposedly this is a spiritual practice, there's always like someone standing in between,
mhm,
you and the divine, shall we say, that you have to work through a priest. It's the priest who is accessing your forgiveness for your sins or, your, the host of your communion, you know,
mhm,
service or whatever. And, And that's not the case, uh, with shamanism. It's everyone is encouraged to develop their own relationship with it, their own relationship with their helping spirits that will guide them through life, protect them, inform them, advise them, share their wisdom with you, and that's, why I don't think it's exactly what I would call a religion, and what we how we term religion.
Yeah. And the fact that if we, conceive and think that it's been around for 100,000 years, it predates so many things.
Yes, it is the mother of all spiritual practices and all healing modalities.
Right. And if we have different continents, we see different expressions of the same sense of belief, all called shamanism.
Yeah.
Indigenous, Celtic, et cetera, different types that just core shamanism, just different ways we've adapted even in our day and age, the practices and the teachings. I think at the core is always a sense of connection to spirit and to self, a sense of integrity, that you're in service to not only others, but a sense of a calling that you feel.
Mhm.
And it's not to be taken on ill-advisedly or without consideration, because there are some rigors to it in the way of, holding good boundaries and keeping integrity within working with folks, not getting in over your head, not practicing medicine without a license, and a variety of things that we see all the time in the name of, spiritual healing and healing.
Mhm.
And anything that maligns others in order for you to lift yourself up as the healer, I would, like, run the other way as fast as I could, even if I was limping, you know? It's
That's why I like the word practitioner, and
yeah,
that's what I use. I don't use the word healer.
yeah,
Someone wants to call me that or someone wants to call me a shaman, that's fine, but I'm not gonna call myself that. I'm a
mm,
shamanic practitioner.
yeah,
I still feel like I'm learning. I learn something new every day,
yes,
and that's the way it should be. I don't put myself forward, as like, "Oh, I got this down. I know everything."
yeah.
Uh, it really is shamanism is a way of life. It's not something that you do on a Sunday. So, it's a way of seeing things, it's a way of being in the world, it's a way of relating,
Mhm,
not just to people, but to nature, to the land, to your helping spirits, and, um, it's, a living and breathing thing,
mhm.
which is the other reason why I like it, you know?
Yeah,
It feels the most natural to me of all the things that I've studied, heavily studied numerology and, past life regression, medical intuitive, spiritual counseling. I mean, I did lots and lots of different things, and I would get bored because I would come out the other side of it and I would sort of feel like, okay, been there, done that, what's next? And, I kind of fell into shamanism, almost 30 years ago, and I have not been bored yet.
mhm.
Far from it. I get
Yeah,
more and more fascinated by it as time goes
yeah,
on. Um, it seems to be the path for me.
yeah. Well, I agree on the word practitioner because it's also the practice of medicine, and I practice every day to gain more knowledge and insight and understanding, and, so that's exactly how I feel as well,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's a good thing. Well, thank you, Jane, for sharing some of your afternoon with us and with our listeners. It's been a pleasure to hear and understand and be exposed to your new book, and for folks to rush into grief. I mean, rush out and get it right away, and know that um, I think the book can open up a lot of things that a person could explore in such a positive way, and even reassure them that what they're feeling is actually true
Yeah,
and real.
yeah.
So Thank you very much for being with us. Yeah.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for your interest in my book. I totally, totally appreciate it.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, folks, it's time to rate and review the podcast. And you know how it goes. We want good rates and reviews so we can get more exposure. And if you don't feel you can give a good rate and review, then just ignore everything I'm saying. So we'll be back next time with some more guests and continuing on and having good conversations. So thank you, everybody, for being with us today and have a great day. That's a wrap for this episode of the Dr. Mary Louder podcast show. I hope you've heard something today that made you think, laugh, or say, well, now that was a plot twist I didn't expect. Just remember, your health journey is more than lab results and supplements. It's spirit, soul, and story, and sometimes a gadget or two you probably should have returned. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please share our podcast with someone you love. If you didn't like the show, well, maybe don't tell anybody then. And if you want more soulful medicine, curious conversations, and tools that actually help, visit me anytime at drmarylauder.com. Until next time, stay kind and stay curious. Music today is provided by Mr. Dave Evans. He composed, played, and engineered this song specifically for our podcast, and it's called Soul Strings, an acoustic reflection of the healing path. Thanks, Dave. It's great music.